Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being wherever you are in the world. I'm grateful for those in the room, and I know that many others are watching this recording online. We continue with our work in addressing this pandemic, and in the midst of that, my mind wanders to things from the past, from things that I'm anticipating in the future. And something that occurred to me this week really speaks to the topic that I had this morning, which is be still and know that God is all. A personal story about this. I actually, many years ago, had the Science of Mind teaching symbol, the symbol that's on the wall here, the symbol that you see on our website, the symbol that represents to me the teachings of Science of Mind. We call it the teaching symbol. It actually represents the creative process. And I was so enamored with it that, I don't know, over a decade ago, I actually had it tattooed onto my upper right arm. So I've got right here, I've got that tattooed, and just about 5 years ago, after I came back from a trip to Thailand, I had another tattoo on my left upper arm, and that's a tattoo of the face of a tiger. And I'd love to tell you that story, but I'm not going to tell you that story today. I'll just say that I was so influenced by an experience with tigers that I had it tattooed onto my left upper arm. And what I realized right after I got that second tattoo was that it was much bigger than the one that's on my right arm. And even the artist that did the work for me pointed out that there was a bit of an imbalance on my arms now. And so I've been pondering for a couple of years about what I would put on, what I would add to the symbol to make it larger, to make it more full and balanced on my upper arms. And so strangely, what has come to me is this phrase, to have it in a circular pattern put around the symbol. Be still and know that God is all. And yes, this is not the Bible quote, which is from Genesis, be still and know that I am God. I thought if I put that on my arm, that I would have a lot of explaining to do from people that read it, and then I'd be coming from a defensive posture. And you don't, as I teach all of my students, you don't start with the second step of treatment, which is to recognize that we are the divine. We absolutely believe that beyond any question, but it makes sense. It makes logical sense to set this up in a way that we start with an understanding of the divine and move then to our individualized experience of that and understanding of that. So what I need to do is start with the beginning, and this is the phrase that I've decided to do. Be still and know that God is all. And there's some elements about that that are really important to me as well. And one is that I'm not going to put be still and know that I am God, and I'm not going to write be still and know that all is God, which you might think is the same thing, but I don't think so. I don't think that all is God and God is all are equal, even though the word is would imply that. I believe that if you say all is God, that what you're creating there is the idea that things are God. And I'm going to talk about that a little more here in a minute, but that's not the way I experience it. What I experience is that the focus is the divine presence. What is divine presence? Well, when we say that God is all, we're not limiting God to form, to time, to space, where there's something bigger going on. There's something beyond our understanding going on that this divine presence is involved in. So the idea of saying God is all leaves it wide open for whatever is, whatever could be, whatever has been, and whatever is unknown in the mystery of life is God, is that presence. And with that understanding, it makes sense to me and I can work with it. And it may well end up put on my arm. It isn't yet. I could change my mind, but I don't think so. I think this is where I'm going to go. So what I want to explore here with you around this is how do we, as students of the science of mind, use this kind of a phrase effectively in our lives? And what would we base it on? And one of the foundational ideas that Dr. Holmes put forward in our teaching was what he called our Declaration of Principles. Actually, he originally wrote the Declaration of Principles in response to a newspaper reporter asking him what we believed. And what he responded with was what he believed. But when everybody saw what he believed, we embraced it. Of course, I wasn't there then, but it was embraced by the movement and became what we believe. And the term Declaration of Principles came as its title. And out of that, the beginning of that declaration speaks exactly to what I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do is go through the first few areas of Holmes' speaking to this idea of what is the divine and how it fits into what we teach and what we believe and what we practice. So that document begins with these words. We believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. Now, I have to tell you, that's a lot of information. And so I want to break it down with you. Holmes says, we believe in God. Okay, that's a good start. But that isn't the God that most people experience, the God, the anthropomorphic God that comes out of the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions. That's not the same God. That's not who he's talking about. I know some people have trouble with the word God. I've heard it actually in this room from people that they don't want to hear that word. And my guess is that what they're thinking about is that old model that we grew up being told was so. That's not the God of Ernest Holmes. It's not the God of my understanding. And it's not the God that we believe and work with in this teaching. That's not our understanding. There's something bigger going on. This is not a being. It's not a masculine being. It's not a feminine being. It's something that transcends those elements. It contains all of those things, but that's because everything is contained in the oneness of the divine. Another reason that I say that God is all is that you cannot find God in things. Well, you can't really find God anywhere because God isn't a physical thing. God is something greater than that. And we'll talk about that again more in a minute, but I want to go through this phrase very carefully to see what else is there. He calls God the living Spirit Almighty. I think that works fine. The word that jumps out at me there is almighty, that God is all-powerful, that what we use to describe that is the word omnipotent, to say that all power is God, all might is God. And that doesn't mean that there's a God that has some power over us as underlings, that God does something to correct us or to be punitive with us or anything of the sort. That's not how it works. It's saying that all power, all might is God. So if that's what we are, then we have that power. And we're using power all the time. To function in these bodies, we have to have power. We have to have the power to breathe. We have to have the power for our hearts to beat. We have to have the power of the muscles in our body to move from place to place. We're using the power of the divine all the time in our bodies. But it also transcends our bodies. That power that Holmes is speaking of there is omnipotent. It is everything that is powerful, including our ability to think thoughts that are created into form. That's an extraordinary power. And that's the power of the divine that we find in ourselves. And it is almighty. It is almighty. He says that God is indestructible. Well, you can't argue that point because God isn't physical. And you can only destroy things that are physical. And frankly, I don't even think you can destroy things. I think the word destruction was kind of a made-up word. that says that things can be destroyed. What can be is things are created, and things are created out of things that have already been created. So that if you take a pile of wood, and it's wood, and you know what it is, but you light a match and set it on fire, it'll burn to where all these gases will blow off of it, and what will remain are ashes. So what you've created are gases and ashes. You could say that you destroyed the wood, but you haven't really. You've transformed it into something else. And using that analogy, of course, has its challenges because it looks destructive, but everything is transformed into something else, everything in the physical world. We seem to be transformed by our deeper understanding of life. And that's a good thing. Do we change through that? Absolutely. But there's no destruction going on. I mean, we could say that we're destroying our old ideas. Perhaps we are, but we're setting them down. They're not important to us. But the divine is not destructible. It can't happen. It won't happen. Holmes says that the divine is absolute. I think that is one of the best words I know because it is so inclusive. Something that is absolute has nothing outside of itself. To me, the word absolute implies omnipresence. It is everywhere and always. There is nothing going on that doesn't include the divine, which makes it real easy when we see things in our lives that we don't particularly like. Our work is to delve into that thing that we don't particularly like and find the divine. When we find God in the midst of something that doesn't work for us, we're helping to understand that thing that we're saying doesn't work for us, because in fact it works perfectly for us. It works perfectly to awaken us to a greater understanding. Anything that we don't like isn't our enemy, isn't our problem, unless we want to make it that. But I don't want to make it that. If I have something that looks like a problem, I want to recognize that there's a divine element there. And my job is to identify it. And when I identify it, suddenly it's not a problem anymore. I understand it. A lot of times it's really just about rising above this thing that looks like a problem or a challenge or something that's in my way. The truth is that nothing is in my way. That who I am and what I bring to life is absolute, as Holmes says about the divine. And then he ends his point by calling the divine self-existent cause. Self-existent because it doesn't require anything to make it. It has no making to be done. It is the creator. It is the maker of things. And by being the maker of things, by creating things as cause, at the point of cause, we have a physical universe. And in the same way the divine does that in the universe, and who knows how many universes and how far that all goes, we do the same thing at the point of us. You know, you get a picture of the Milky Way, the galaxy that our solar system dwells in, and you start to get a sense of just with one galaxy, how tiny our little solar system is and our little planet is. When you recognize in space how small we are in the all-ness of all, we seem pretty insignificant. But the thing is, and we learned this from Troward, that wherever we are, and I'm not talking about our physical bodies, I'm talking about us as spirit, we exist infinitely and absolutely as spirit. We just focus it at the point of a body. And by doing that, we create our lives. We create our lives absolutely in the same way that the divine in its totality creates the entire universe. There's no difference. So being a self-existent cause, being the self-existent cause, demonstrates that the divine is in charge of everything, not over us, as us. And by being in charge as us, we have dominion over our experience. We have dominion over our bodies. We have dominion over the conditions of our lives. We have the ability to create whatever is ours to create. And those things that look like our problems, those things that look like they're getting in our way, are really not in our way. They're our pathway for greater understanding of who we are. So that's kind of where we start with the declaration of principles. And then we go to this statement. This one, capital one, manifests itself, capital itself, in and through all creation. Okay, it manifests itself in and through all creation, but it is not absorbed by its creation, which means that this divine presence that I'm talking about today cannot be found in things, cannot actually be found in people. You can dissect a human body, you don't find God. There's no substance of God that is physical. The divine transcends this idea. The divine is something greater than physical form. So you won't find the presence of the divine in anything that is physical. If we didn't include that idea about it not being absorbed into its creation, then we could worship the mountains or the seas or the sky or many other ways that people have decided this is God. God does not exist in these things in a way that can be found. That's why when we say that God is in something, we're having a very limited look at what God is. The greater understanding is that everything is in God. And from that perspective, we start getting a sense of what God is. So that all form, all galaxies, all universes, whatever's out there, are contained within the oneness of the divine. That's really big and takes a lot of work to come to any level of comprehension of what that means. But I believe it's much more accurate than thinking that God is in this person. God is not in my body. I am that presence. And I'm not in this body either. I use this body. I communicate with this body. But this body is not who I am. I'm an eternal being of love and light. I am not a body. And I believe that's what Holmes is saying right there. In his next statement, he says, the manifest universe is the body of God. Okay. Now that does not mean that God exists inside a body called the universe. But it is, at least for what we know, everything that is manifest by this divine creative force exists in this universe. Again, there could be many universes, but we'll just deal with ours at this point. The manifest universe is the body of God, meaning that the workings of the divine are happening within this experience of physical form, this time-space continuum that we're involved in. That's where this one we call God is operating. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. The universe exists. You and I have these bodies so that God can relate to God, so that God can express and experience itself as us and as everything else in the universe. This is constantly going on. This is what, if there was a void and no physical anything, there was no time and no space, there would still be this presence. It just wouldn't be interacting with itself, at least in ways that it has chosen to interact with itself. It would be in that state of almost suspended animation. But clearly, this force, this principle, this cause chose to create this time-space continuum and this whole intricate thing called physical form, made of atoms and quarks and neurons and all this fundamental structural stuff that makes it so that our senses can identify it, so that we can see it and hear it and touch it and taste it and smell it. Because that's what the game is that we, as the presence of the divine, are expressing into this physical form and experiencing what comes back to us. And by doing that, God is interacting with God. That's what's happening. That's the whole point of this. And apparently, this creative force of the universe doesn't want all of it to be easy. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's challenging. But what comes from those challenges and from that hardness is the opportunity to understand it even better, to understand the elements of it, to understand our role in it, to see that that divine presence is who and what we are. And this is what carries us to a greater understanding. So I invite you all not to get caught up in your problems, not to think that that's the end all of life on planet Earth, is that we have problems. We have problems because they call us to know who we are. They call us to remember. They call us to recognize our own divinity. That's why we do it. And out of that, we create an infinite self-knowingness, an ability to know who we are because we have these wonderful senses and these beautiful and wonderful bodies to move through this life so that we can express into it and experience back from it. That's the self-knowingness of God. And then the final one that I want to share with you is we believe in the incarnation of the Spirit, of this divine presence in everyone. In everyone. Nobody's left out. Many people don't know this is so. That doesn't mean they're left out. They're absolutely, completely in that divine expression and experience, just like the rest of us are, whether they know it or not. And that all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. There is only one. There is one presence. There is one power. There is one mind. And this is what we use to have our lives. So I bring all of this to you for a very specific purpose. And I use that phrase out of Genesis, even though I've changed it somewhat, as a way to remember, to awaken to this. Because I want you to know that I do not always remember, that I get caught up in the drama of my life just like everybody else. I feel tired. I think things are unfair. I have all of these challenges that I deal with just like everybody else. Truly, I have less of that today than I have had in other times in my life, but still, those thoughts come. And the thing to remember, the thing to know, comes from a stillness. It comes from stopping the chatter, stopping the judgment, stopping the confusion or the fear or whatever else may have a grip on me in a moment. It calls me to be still and to remember and to know the truth. And the truth is that God is all. And when I know that, and when I live my life from that knowing, all is well. Because all is God. So with this idea of stillness, I want to invite you to join me in a spiritual mind treatment. So if you would, if it's comfortable for you, close your eyes, relax your body. And join me in knowing these things. I know this presence. I know this power. It is absolute. It is unwavering. It is perfect. And it is infinite. And all of that dwells at the point of me. So as I speak my word, I speak with the authority of the divine. I speak with the awareness of that which created all that I can see and know, and so much more. I am absolutely certain that this presence is absolute and complete in its entirety, and I dwell in it. I am it, and it is me. God is all. God is me. For God cannot be all if God doesn't include me. The truth is that God is me. And God is everyone else and everything else. That which is behind this animated life, this being in bodies, this moving through the trials and tribulations of life on planet Earth, is all perfect. It's all unfolding as it must for our consciousness to be revealed in its divine nature. It is the truth of who we are. And I am certain that whatever I put my attention upon is revealed into my life. And as much as I know that is true for me, I know it is true for everyone. It is true for everyone that is hearing these words right now. We are the divine. We are the perfection of life. We are the creative force. We have dominion over our experience. And we are on a perfect path of awakening, knowing who we are, knowing that we're here to do what is ours to do, and to be who we have come to be as the presence of the divine. This is absolute, and I am certain of it. So even though there are times I may forget, right now I remember. In the stillness of this moment, I know that God is all, and that I am God. And with that certainty, my heart is filled to overflowing in gratitude for this awareness, for this life, and for all the blessings in it. And I simply let it be in gratitude, in love, and forevermore. And so it is. Yeah. So again, thank you for being here today. We're going to do one other thing. We have received gifts from people in the mail. And I very much want to bless these, and I want that to be recorded. So I have brought them here into our sanctuary in the midst of the wonderful folks that are joining me here, so that we can bless this together, so that we can know that by being grateful for this, that it continues to grow and prosper this center. I am so grateful for everyone that goes to our website and clicks the donation button and sends money to this center. And I am so grateful for people who take the time to write a check or have their bank write it and put it in the mail and send it to us, so that we can continue meeting our obligations through this very interesting time. So I'm not sure, but I believe that we have, yes, our investment affirmation. And I'm going to invite you at home, wherever you are, and all those here together to repeat this with me. I freely and joyously give from the abundance and fullness of my overflowing wealth, knowing my gift goes with love as it touches and blesses the world. And so it is. So blessings to all for the good work that you're doing, being clear, being safe, staying well, and doing what is yours to do in the world. God bless you. I look forward to being with you again very soon. And so it is. Yay.